Hello, welcome to this video on ownership and control. So what we're going to look at in this video is the significance of the divorce of ownership from control, why the owners of the business don't necessarily control a business and how that can cause potential problems. So let's imagine some different types of businesses. Let's start on the top right hand corner with a self-employed business. So essentially you are the business. Now, what would be your objective as the owner of the business? Well, probably to maximize profit. But you are the business as well, so you run the business and make the decisions. So you're also going to want to maximize profit. The owner and the manager are the same person. So it's very likely that your objectives will be the same. Let's consider a slightly different scenario. Let's consider a public limited company, for example, Apple. And now in the bottom left-hand corner, we have the shareholders. So this Apple is a PLC, a public limited company. The owners are going to be members of the public, they're going to be insurance funds, and so on. Now let's consider who actually makes the decisions in Apple. Well, that will be the managers. And so we have a difference here. The owners and the managers are not the same. And so will they necessarily have the same objectives? What's going to be the objective for the shareholders, these people down here? Well, it's probably going to be to maximize the dividends that they receive from Apple and to maximize the share price, the value of the shares that they own in Apple. But what might be the objectives for the managers? Well, maybe if you're really cynical, it's going to make sure that their job is well protected, to make sure that they get paid as much as possible, to make sure they have a nice big desk, even to make sure they have luxury jets to travel on. So we can see that there might be an issue where the objectives of the two parties are different, and this might lead to a problem within the business. And we call this the principal agent problem, and it's an example of asymmetric or imperfect information. We have the principal, the owner of the business, who might have one objective to maximize their wealth, but they need people to run the business for them. So they will have to hire an agent, and the agent office are known as the managers, and they might have different objectives. And the owners of the business, the owners of the firm, have a problem here with information because it's very difficult for them to observe directly the day-to-day decisions that are being made by the management team. And if the company is not performing very well, what can they do? What can they do about it? So it's worth thinking about what is happening here and what is motivating people that work within a firm. Well, generally speaking, we have the directors and managers. They're the number one people with responsibility for what's happening within the firm. Now, how do owners influence the decisions that are made by the directors? Well, the shareholders in a public limited company will normally elect directors, so they'll vote for them, and it's their responsibility to look after their interests in the company. But they only get to influence the decisions really through that voting process, which normally happens at an annual general meeting once a year. So there's a limited impact that they can have on, changing the managers. The workers don't have the power to run the company, but collectively they may be able to influence some decisions. Trade unions, for example, might exert an influence over wages, job losses, and health and safety, and so therefore costs. Consumers obviously also affect the performance of the business through their demand. So we have this idea of the principal agent problem. Really, it's only the managers that we can control as shareholders. And how do we make sure that the best interests of the management are the same as the best interests of the shareholders? How can we align the aims of these two different groups of stakeholders? Well, here might be some examples. What we can do potentially is try and make the employees own some of the shares, like the shareholders. So, for example, a common thing might be something called stock options. So you reward the managers to by giving them an option that if they hit these targets, they'll get shares in the business, and therefore they'll be incentivized to make sure the share price is as high as possible. Although, again, they might do a short-term tactic in order to achieve that, which might not be in the best long-term interest of the business. But that's a way of aligning them. Often we can give them long-term employment contracts. So this might encourage managers to take decisions in the long-term best interest of the business, rather than just trying to make a short-term quick profit, which may not maximize value in the long term. And again, also maybe asking them to hold shares or stocks within the business for a longer period of time. So for example, down here, Apple has a policy that senior executives have to hold 3 times their annual salary in shares in Apple. And they have to keep this for a minimum of 5 years in order to retain those shares. So again, they have an incentive here to make sure the share price is as high as possible, but over a longer period of time. So this is a good way to make sure the managers of Apple want the same thing as the shareholders of Apple. So in this video, we've discussed the difference between the ownership of a business and controlling a business, and how that can be a problem, but also some ideas of how it might be resolved. That's it. Thanks for listening. Ciao.